Hello, Internet, and welcome to Meet PRENSA. I'm Karina, and today we have a very special guest. Before we get into it, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're liking our videos. Today we have Taylor Hirschberg from Out Magazine with us. Taylor, how are you?
Oh, hi, Karina. Thank you so much for having me on. Doing well today. How about you?
I'm great, thank you. So Taylor recently wrote a very important piece in Out Magazine. It's this month's cover story. It's entitled Venezuela's Secret: Crimes Against LGBTQ Migrants and Sex Workers. The piece has actually transcended just reporting and observation and storytelling, and it's actually led to actions that have changed the life of one individual profiled in the piece named Victor, who faced homophobic violence in Latin America and was actually shot. Taylor, have you been in touch with Victor? How's he doing?
Well, Karina, yes. I'm in touch with Victor almost every single day. So currently he is at the border of Venezuela on the Brazilian side. He's, of course, under lockdown due to COVID-19 restrictions. He seems to be in pretty good spirits, but he's still awaiting the surgery to get the bullet actually out of his spine. He's really happy with the story, and he is really proud to actually share his life with all of the outreaders and beyond.
In addition to your friendship with Victor, what also led you to have this interest in Latin America and in homophobic violence across the region?
Well, that's a great question, Karina. So my background is actually as a humanitarian. I've done a lot of field response for HIV field response, disease response in Latin America. While I lived there, I saw a lot of things that, frankly made me sad. In a world where it's full of beautiful homes, cultures, music, families, food, you saw this gap in the way that people in the LGBTQ community were actually being treated. You saw differences in care. You saw differences in the way that the government treated them. You saw a difference in rights. And so I knew that I had to write something about it and do something about it. So that's the reason why I went to Out Magazine to see if I could tell the story.
Now, you also mentioned that when people flee Latin America and they're coming to the US as immigrants, sometimes they face even worse situations over here. You mentioned one individual, Gustavo Acosta, who it was a very troubling situation with ICE agents masturbating in front of him. Can you tell us anything more about that situation?
Well, it was fellow detainees that were actually masturbating in front of him. And, it was an interesting story to hear. The way that he introduced it to us was that he was nothing but a number. That's all that he meant to the ICE detention officers. And he would talk about the food that he would have, sort of every single day he would have the same thing over a 13-month period. Imagine having to eat the same exact thing for 13 months. And he would talk about, where he couldn't escape no matter what ICE detention center he was in. He could never escape the sexual harassment that later led to sexual abuse. Gustavo actually is out on bail from ICE detention, awaiting his court case. So him telling this story to Out, and in his own words, was incredibly, incredibly brave. And
very courageous.
Yeah, very courageous. He's actually in New York right now. He's working as a hairdresser. He's got a great spirit. He's an amazing person.
Well, we send all the best to Gustavo. Has ICE responded to the horrific allegations that were made against them in your story?
I did reach out to Homeland Security, and I never heard anything back. I have to be honest, I'm a new reporter, so understanding the ways to navigate to get comment was a bit challenging. But then after I did receive information on why they didn't give comment was because they're getting up to speed with the Biden administration. I would also suspect that a part of the fact I didn't get comment as well was because I did reach out during the Trump administration when I began the story several months ago.
Now, for the regular citizen, the average citizen that's watching this, that might be moved by your piece, what are some things that they could do today to help out? Are there any organizations, in addition to the ones profiled in your piece, such as HAIS, are there any other organizations that they could donate to or keep in touch with? What would you recommend?
Now, that's another great question. So there are things that everyone can do. So I'd like to start out by talking about sort of the bigger picture that can help you funnel into what would work best for you. So the first thing that everyone needs to do is you need to understand what is happening. You need to inform yourself. You need to find a way to connect with what's happening. Once you do that, once you understand what's going on, then you'll start to realize what you feel like you can do. So there's several organizations out there that work with different needs that members of the LGBTQ displaced population need. For instance, there's resettlement organizations like HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society. You've got ORAM, which is another organization that works with LGBT displaced migrants, who helps with job training and job placement. Then you've got more, I guess, on the ground, in the middle of transition, literally leaving places like Venezuela. You have organizations like UNHCR that are working in the field. You've got Doctors Without Borders, an organization that I've worked with prior to doing this work and prior to working at University of Colorado Boulder. And you can volunteer for these organizations. You can raise funds for these organizations. But first, you have to understand really what you want to do and what mission you want to go for. Just as something for everyone to know, just over the past decade, over 80,000 people overall worldwide have been displaced from their homes. So while it's not safe to fully get all of the data for everyone that is a member of the LGBTQ community, because 69 countries criminalize it, 8 of which by death, you can only assume with 80 million people how many of those are members of the LGBTQ community. So anything and everything that anyone can do is what's needed. Just find your home for where you think you can do the best and the most work that you're passionate about.
Thank you for that, for those insights and that advice. As a follow-up to your story, what questions do you have for the Biden White House?
Oh, wow. That's a big question. So if you look in comparisons to spending from the U.S. government for SOGS, so that's sexual orientation, gender identity, sexual expression, the United States, per how much they give to multilateral organizations, is far less than most other countries. So the countries that give the most are actually Sweden and the United Kingdom. To match their spending according to what we already give, we would need to give $90 billion. Currently, we only give $12 billion. $12 billion. That's a lot of money, right? Mm-hmm. But still, we need to really, I guess, support what we say and turn it into action. I think the other question that I would have for him would be who he's going to appoint to lead the special envoy, the LGBTQ envoy, because I think that's going to be really pivotal to changing minds around our country and around the world about how the United States feels about LGBTQ rights.
Great. So lastly, a question that we ask all of our guests, and it's really an opportunity to shout out, great people you've met along the way. So the question is, who are the most underrated workers in the American newsroom? And I know you mentioned that you're not a journalist necessarily by trade. You consider yourself more a humanitarian. So I think this will be an interesting question.
Yeah, so I think one of the most beautiful parts of this story was the friendship that I built with David Artavia, who's the editor-in-chief of Out Magazine. His passion, his commitment, his intelligence really speaks to who he is and to journalism. And I could feel that in our initial meeting. And so in our second time talking about this story, which actually started as me trying to find a way to elevate Victor's story to help get him out of Venezuela, I was brave enough to say, hey, will you be my mentor? And over the coming 8 months, a beautiful friendship that was based in a mission to help save a person's life, and that then generated into Out's cover story, which is generally a pop culture fashion sort of I guess magazine, to put something like this on their cover. It generated, I know, because of that friendship with that lovely, awesome human being. And so as I went through that journey with him as mentee, I was also able to observe what it was like for him to be editor-in-chief. He did it with such grace, but I also learned that there's so much that goes into it. You have to think about strategy with sales. You have to think about strategies with your content providers, photography, logistics, you name it. Every single thing. You're building a magazine. And I think that people often forget that editor-in-chief means so much more than just setting the tone for what the magazine's going to be, but it encompasses almost the whole business of what a magazine's going to be, and creatively, and also conceptualizing business-wise. I mean, everything you can think of really lands on the, I guess, shoulders of the editor-in-chief. And I don't think someone who is not familiar with the work realizes that. So that would be the person I would shout out and also say is not recognized for all the work that they do.
Well, thank you for that. And it was certainly a successful partnership between the two of you, because the piece led to real change. So we're excited to see that, and excited to see what else is going to come out soon from Out Magazine, and the continued success you'll have with your pieces. So Taylor, thank you. Don't ever stop reporting. And again, thank you for joining us. And to all of our viewers, don't forget to like and subscribe. That's a wrap.